at this movie. So this is probably going to be the shortest video in the Lethal Weapon series. So I apologize if it is. I just really don't have that much to say about it. So today I'll be reviewing 1998's. Oh my God, this movie's 20 years old this year. Almost. In 2 months. No, month and a half. Whatever, 2 months. Today I'll be reviewing 1998's Lethal Weapon 4. I guess you could call this a 20-year anniversary review. Lethal Weapon 4, right here. So, Lethal Weapon 4, I have a little bit of an interesting experience with. Hang on, let me readjust my camera. Silver the Hedgehog. Oh, hello. I have a little bit of an interesting story regarding Lethal Weapon 4. And yes, I'm wearing a fitness compression shirt. Deal with it. Red and black look good on me. And a bandana. Yes, I'll make a picture. You just gave it away. So, Lethal Weapon 4, I really don't have that much nostalgia for. Granted, I don't have a shit ton of nostalgia. Yeah, I know my hair is a mess. I don't have a shit ton of nostalgia for the Lethal Weapon series, but I have more nostalgia for the first three films than I do for this one. And especially more than the TV series, but that's for a different reason. Um, Lethal Weapon 4 was the last of the Lethal Weapon series, or Lethal Weapon films that I ever saw. And it's the one that I've seen the most. If I had to venture a guess, I would roughly say I've seen Lethal Weapon 3 about 30 times, 2 25 or so, and I'd say the first movie I've seen 20 times ish. It could be more, it also could be less. It's fair to say that I've seen the first three movies many times over. Today was only the third viewing that I have had of Lethal Weapon 4. I kid you not. Third viewing, and I've been a Lethal Weapon fan for roughly about 5 years or so. Yeah, that kind of goes to show how much of an impact this movie does not leave upon me. Not to say that this movie is bad. Don't get me wrong. If I come off as being sort of negative towards the film, I'm really not. I just want to kind of paint a picture of my thoughts and feelings towards this film in general. I part of me want to say that this is my least favorite of the Lethal Weapon series. Ultimately, I say no, it's not, because I still do enjoy this movie a little bit more than the first Lethal Weapon film. Not saying the first movie's bad. Don't get me wrong. I've explained why the first one is my least favorite. But I can definitely say that this one has arguably the most problems. Even though on my pros and cons sheet, I think I have the same amount of cons for both 1 and 4. But this is where the problems are at their biggest. They're detrimental to the film. Whereas the first movie really only had one detrimental issue, at least that I could see objectively. The other two were, I think, they were just more personal taste. Um, for this one, only one of them is for personal taste, and the other two I feel are detrimental to the film. So let's get into just not as good as no. It's about as good as the first movie. It's not as good as 2 and especially 3. And that's another thing about Lethal Weapon 4 that I find to be a little strange is that a lot of people shit on 3. They shit on it like no tomorrow, but the general consensus for Lethal Weapon 4 is it's not as good as the first two, but it is better than 3, which I don't agree with whatsoever. I mean, if you see my Lethal Weapon 3 review, you already know I give that movie the highest recommendations. So the plot of Lethal Weapon 4. How can you talk to Jack, aka Big Jack Films? With the English language. Now he and I are we're just friends. We talk online and we Skype once or twice a week, but that's neither here nor there. So the plot of Lethal Weapon 4, Lorna Cole is again played by Renee Russo, returning from the previous film, is still with Martin Riggs, Sergeant Murdoch Riggs, and she's pregnant with Riggs's baby, and they are not married, but they both are thinking about it. She wants to get married, however, she understands that Riggs, in many ways, is still in love with his previous wife, and he still feels very committed to her. He kind of wants to marry her, but for those reasons that I just mentioned, he's very hesitant to do so, which is understandable. A lot of widows do that. And Roger Murtaugh's daughter, once again played by Danny Glover. His oldest daughter, Rianne, played by Tracy Wolff, who I think is the same actress who plays her in the entire series, is also pregnant. Uh, and she is impregnated by Detective Lee Butters, played by Chris Rock. Since he does not want his daughter to marry a police officer, he is not told who the father is, however. And due to issues with the department's insurance carrier over the actions of Riggs and Murtaugh while they're sergeants patrolling the streets, Captain Murphy, once again played by Steve Cahan, now this is the one where he has the least amount of screen time, he promotes the two to captains, more like acting captains, but they are referred to as captains for majority of the film. The two captains, along with Leo Getz, again played by Joe Pesci, come upon a Chinese immigrant smuggling ring after running an ocean-going cargo ship to the ground, and the captain of the boat escapes in the ensuing gunfight. And upon the investigation that arrives shortly after, Murtaugh finds a Chinese man named Hong and his family, played by Eddie Ko, hiding from the immigration officers in a life raft in order to avoid deportation. I can't tell you the story details about Jack's channel, Silver Hedgehog. Sorry. If he did, he probably would not be very happy with me. Anyway, let's see, where was I? And upon seeing the family inside the life raft, Murtaugh decides to give shelter in his home to Hong and his family, and they quickly bond together along with Riggs and Lorna. Hong reveals that he is looking for his uncle, who is a special effects Silver Hedgehog. That's how. Stop interrupting me, please. Um, Hong reveals that he is looking for his uncle, who is a skilled engraver who has paid for their passage to the U.S. by working for a certain group of people. I'll get to that momentarily. Continuing investigation ring leads the two captains to a Chinese crime boss named Benny Chan. However, he's referred to in film as Uncle Benny, operating from a Chinatown restaurant. And there they are introduced to a high-ranking Chinese triad negotiator, Hua Sing Ku, played by the legendary Jet Li. This movie being Jet Li's American film debut, which kind of blew my mind when I first saw this film. He only speaks one line of English in the whole movie, and that is, "You in Hong Kong, you'd be dead." I think that's it, at least. The rest of his dialogue he speaks in Cantonese. I think it's Cantonese or Mandarin. Two's languages are very similar, and that is the certain group of people who has paid, who the uncle of Hong is working for. Venom the Dark. No, oh, hello! I love your thumbnail, by the way. Venom the Darkness. We are Venom. If I was wearing my Venom shirt, you'd appreciate that line much more. Anyway, shit, where was I? Chan forces Riggs and Murtaugh out of his restaurant when the officers show no probable cause of arresting him. However, they clearly know that um, Uncle Benny has something to do with this going on, but because there's no probable cause for arrest, there's nothing that they can do. And outside, Riggs spots the escaped ship captain, and he gives chase throughout Chinatown. However, because this is a recurring thing throughout this movie, Riggs is showing that he's getting old and he's kind of losing his touch with being a cop. So he, thank you for subbing, Venom. Uh, Riggs is getting old and he fails to capture the ship captain. However, Wasing Ku later intercepts the guy and kills him as punishment for attracting the police's attention by strangling him with a special necklace that he had that he can extend and has a very thin wire so he can strangle his victims, killing them, obviously. And then Chan and Ku start to take steps to eliminate all interfering people in their plans. Hong is able to contact his uncle, however, this leads the Triad group to Murtaugh's house. Triad thugs and as well as Ku kidnap the Hongs, and after a short fight, tie up Murtaugh, his family, Riggs, and Cole inside Murtaugh's house, and they start to set the house ablaze. However, Ping, Hong's little grandson, he's maybe like 5 years old, has evaded capture, and he manages to cut the bands tying Riggs and Murtaugh together in order for them to escape the burning house. And though Riggs and Murtaugh quickly give chase and kill some of the Triad members, Ku manages to you may not like my opinion on that Omega picture. Anyway, where was I? Ku manages to escape, and Ku brings Hong to his uncle at a warehouse where he has been engraving plates for a giant counterfeiting business for Ku and Chan in exchange for transit for his family to be able to come to America. However, Ku kills Hong in front of his uncle in a rather brutal fashion by crushing his larynx. And he does this just to assure Hong's uncle's. Do I watch Attack on Titan? I don't watch the anime, but I do own the 2 live action movies. Look forward to my review of those 2 with my brother in the next few days or so. How's it going to be a tough sit? Anyway, in order to assure Hong's uncle's continued work. The officers attempt to shake Chan for more information while he's having a dentist appointment, which is probably the funniest scene in the whole movie, where Uncle Chan, Riggs, Murtaugh, and Butters all get stoned off their asses on laughing gas. And that's when Murtaugh finds out that Butters is his son-in-law and also the father of his grandchild, which at first Murtaugh is quite displeased at for being left in the dark for so long. However, during that scene they're unable to get any leads until they discuss the information they know with Detective Ng, or I'll just say Ing. It's spelled Ng. I'm just gonna say Ing. Played by Calvin Jung, who has worked on cases in the past involving the Chinese government quite a few times. And Ing recognizes that Ku must be trying to make a deal with a corrupt Chinese general for the release of the Forefathers, 4 high-ranking Chinese Triad members that include Ku's brother, played by Conan Lee. He doesn't really have any dialogue in the film. He has he has one or two lines of dialogue in the film. He really is just kind of a throwaway character. Um, let's see. And some new info leads Riggs and Murtaugh to the abandoned warehouses where they find the bodies of Uncle Chan, Hong, and his uncle. The latter, the his uncle and Chan being killed by Ku after they have used up their usefulness again by being strangled with Ku's special necklace. However, knowing that Ku is using counterfeit money, the Riggs, Murtaugh, and Butters intercept the exchange between Ku and the corrupt general, and telling everybody that the money is fake. And a firefight breaks out between the Triad, the general's private army, and the cops, and most of the Triad and the army are killed. However, Ku manages to escape with his brother, but his brother is shot and killed by Murtaugh. And then Riggs and Murtaugh are separated as they follow Ku to a pier. And they both wait, no. They're not no, they're not separated. Riggs and Murtaugh are they engage in a brawl with Ku, though they quickly are separated as Ku, being much more faster and agile than Murtaugh, manages to knock him out. However, Riggs finishes off the fight with Ku. He collapses the LA Harbor Pier and sends him underwater. And while Riggs is being strangled underwater, he manages to find an AK-47 and riddles Ku's body with bullets in the process. And Murtaugh arrives in time to help rescue Riggs from a piece of concrete that had broken off and pinned Riggs underwater. Later, Riggs visits the grave of Vicky, kind of being reminiscent of the first film, and asks her advice about should he get married to Lorna, which he still has conflicting feelings about. And then Leo shows up and he tells him a childhood story that gives Riggs a new light on his situation, basically telling him it's okay to love other people who you're still committed to. They're not better, they're just different. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then they learn that Lorna is in the process of giving birth, and they race to the hospital where Riggs and Lorna are ceremonially, but not ceremonially, married by a rabbi just before she enters labor. And their son and Rianne's daughter are born, and Murtaugh accepts Butters as his son-in-law. And then Murphy shows up and gives rank Riggs and Murtaugh their rank of sergeant back, since the city has been insured again. Sorry about that. That was my grandfather grabbing something. So, how about this plot? Well, it. I don't really know what to say about this plot, though. I kind of feel like if this franchise was to keep going on indefinitely, it was only going to be a matter of time before they dealt with the Asian storyline. And I don't mean that in a racist term or anything like that, but I just find that when certain action movie and horror action movie franchises go on long enough, eventually they start delving into foreign and specifically Chinese affairs. Sometimes it's Russian affairs, but a lot of times to make it interesting and to make it more, mythical, or not really mythical, but just really a lot more extravagant, quote unquote. They delve into dealing with Chinese or Japanese affairs. Another action movie franchise I can think of that does this too is James Bond. Um, One of the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies dealt a lot with I think it was Koreans, but also Chinese people as well, because Michelle Yeoh was a Bond girl in one of the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies. It was actually one of the better James Bond movies, in my opinion. So this plot, it's not bad per se, but again, I kind of think it's about as good. No, it's a little better than the first movie because it's not that standard. I want to say it is a little more interesting than that, but it's not as good as two, and really not as good as three. So let's jump right into the pros. Pro number one is that once again the characters are overall very very good. They're not quite as good as they were in the previous two movies. I'd say they're about as good as they were in the first film. Um, I think at this point, honestly, Mel Gibson and Danny Glover just don't have that much to do with their characters. I mean, there's nothing, there's no more growing room for them to do. Like they've already bonded quite well, like almost to father and son, and older brother, younger brother levels of just relationship wise, and also they do work together as partners still. um but I just ultimately feel like they don't really have that much to do in the movie, which isn't a bad thing per se because it does make sense. I feel like action movies are a lot harder to turn into franchises than horror movies because there's a lot more things you can do with horror movies unless you blend the two. But I feel like at this point, they're just kind of running the wheels at this point. Which to some may be bad, for others it may just be okay. For me, I just kind of feel like it's okay. I'll take any chance to see Danny Glover and Mel Gibson be Riggs and Murtaugh towards each other. Though here, it definitely does feel like it's just cranking the wheels at this point. And Chris Rock as Sergeant or Detective Butters. I mean, he's not a bad character, but I'll get to that when I get to the cons. And the rest of the cast, they all do a decent job. Jet Li is, I feel like he's a mixed bag as Wasing Ku. I think that's his name. Yeah, Wasing Ku. He has great facial expressions, and he certainly is a more intimidating villain because he is a master of hand-to-hand combat and who can kill you with just his bare hands. But I'll get to that once again when I get to the cons. But overall, the characters are decent. The pacing of the movie, this is pro number two, is decent. It definitely has taken a bit of a step down, especially from three. And I actually think I actually think this movie has the worst pacing of the entire series. Though I kind of say that loosely because it's not bad, but it's not amazing either. There are definitely a lot more slower bits, mainly in the first half. The second half of the movie is overall very decently paced because there's a lot of action scenes going on after another. But I feel like the first 40 minutes of the movie or so, and this is a longer movie. This movie is an hour and 20. It is no 2 hours and 7 minutes long. This is the longest of the series. The first 40 minutes or so of the movie are a bit slow to get through, but if you're patient and you hang in there, you can get to the rest of the film just fine like that. Um, but it definitely has the least best pacing of the entire series, without a shadow of a doubt. Pro number pro number three is that this movie has great action scenes. The gunfights are a little standard at this point too, because we've had gunfights so many times throughout this series. It's not even funny. It's the hand-to-hand combat scenes that are really, really, really good. Because we're working with an actor, being Jet Li, who is a trained martial artist, a highly trained martial artist, an exceptional martial artist. It does make sense that the fight scenes, specifically the hand-to-hand combat scenes, are a big step up from the previous film. In the past, the fist fights, they weren't terrible. I mean, they're still quite good. They're entertaining, but a lot of it was just I think it was just boxing slash brawling with the occasional karate or taekwondo kick. He boxing, overall the fight scenes in this movie are really 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 good, and this was America's real first taste of what Jet Li was capable of doing as a martial artist. And I'm not sure if Jet Li movies had been imported to the states beforehand. I mean, they probably were, but I can't really think of any of off the top of my head. Jet Li is not one of my favorite martial artists, though I do respect him. This is our first real taste of Jet Li in a first in an American film, and he does leave a good impression. And the fight scenes in this movie are overall very good. And probably the best action scene in the whole movie is after the house is set ablaze. Riggs and Murtaugh are giving chase after the Triad members, and Riggs is getting into a fight with a Triad member on board of this, like, it's like a partial trailer that is furnished on the inside, but it's covered by a sheet of plastic on the unfinished side of it, and it's of course being pulled by a semi on a highway, the plastic ends up giving way, and Riggs ends up riding a table on the dragging plastic. Who do I think is better in martial arts, Jet Li or Jackie Chan? I really don't know, honestly. Um, Jet Li, I think he's faster and he's a little more acrobatic than Jackie Chan, but I think they're pretty close in age. Hang on, let me check something. Oop. Jet Li is 55 years old, and let's see, Jackie Chan. And Jackie Chan is 64. So I definitely think Jackie Chan is probably the more skilled of the two, but that's kind of I'm not really sure. They're both evenly matched in different aspects, so that's kind of a you can take it or leave it type situation. But anyway, the action scenes are very solid, and like I said, my favorite one, Riggs ends up being dragged on the sheet of plastic on a chair, on not chair, a table, and overall, it's a really really fun scene. It kind of leaves you on the edge of your seat. So the action scenes are really fun. Pro number four kind of goes in the action scenes that the fight choreography for the film is very very well done. It's very grounded, and there's not a lot of experimental um, kind of move up and down and shake the camera like I've seen in a lot of martial arts movies. There's a lot of quick cuts though, which kind of gives the impression that Jet Li's character is really, really, really fast. But still, the fight choreography is very well done. It's very crisp. It's very clean. It's not shitty whatsoever, in my opinion. The fight choreography is very, very good. Even though this is not a martial arts movie, what can make or break a martial arts movie kind of goes without saying is if the fight choreography is good or bad. And granted, I've yet to see a movie where the fight choreography. Actually, no, yes, I have. Batman Begins has horrendous martial arts choreography. The fight scenes in that film are just absolutely horrendous. But more often than not, martial arts movies that I've seen have really solid fight choreography. Pro number five is that once again the humor is pretty good in this movie. Though this is definitely like the least funniest of the series. It's more just like a no holds barred action movie, but still has its really funny moments. Like I mentioned, the laughing gas scene is really funny, which is also intercut with Leo having his own dentist appointment, and they're just drilling the shit into his mouth, and he's screaming, "Ah! Roger, hurry up! This hurts! Okay, okay, fuck off! That hurts! Ah!" Anyway, oh shit. um, there's also a lot of really funny dialogue between, once again, between Leo and Butters and Raj and Murtaugh. It's a lot of the same stuff in Lethal Weapon 3, Not as funny as Lethal Weapon 3, but still here it is very funny. The only part of the humor that I really don't care for is there's a recurring gag throughout the film that Riggs and Murtaugh intentionally and also unintentionally fuck up on Butters' last name. Like they'll say anything else but Butters. They'll say boogers, blankets, burgers, biscuits, Buicks, whatever. And at first it's a little funny, but then it gets old and they overplay it and it just gets stupid. So that's the only part of the humor that I really don't care for. And the last pro that I have is that the final fight of this movie is awesome. For once, we get to see Murtaugh actually participate in the final fight against the main villain of the film. It's the only time in the series where we ever see that. And even though Murtaugh, he gets his ass kicked quite easily in the fight, himself manages to get in some pretty good hits towards Jet Li's character and knock him off his ass even once too. So the final fight is really really good, and the way that Riggs kills Wassing Ku is awesome. Even though he shoots him, and that's what ultimately kills him. Before that, he had impaled him on a sharp piece of metal, and it was absolutely actually no, it was Murtaugh that did that, but it was Riggs who kind of yanked him out of Murtaugh's grasp and like lifted him up in the air using the piece of metal and like tearing him apart on the inside. It was a really brutal attack. Something I would do if I was caught up in my own rage. So those are the pros for Lethal Weapon 4. The cons. You could kind of say that the Butters name thing is another like 3.5 con, or yeah, con, because it is ultimately kind of stupid. But here's the main three issues. The one that I have personal taste issue with is Chris Rock. He's a great comedian and he is a good actor. He's one funny son of a bitch. But in this movie, I just don't care for him. I really, really don't care for Chris Rock in this film. I don't think he's that good of an action movie actor. He's much better in just being a comedian in a comedy. Like probably my favorite movie that has Chris Rock in it is The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler. He's absolutely hysterical in that film. But for me personally, in this movie, he sticks out like a sore thumb. And I think this is because this was one of Chris Rock's earliest movies. I think it was, at least. Let me take a quick look. God damn, the movie dude's in his 50s. Christ almighty. Huh. Okay, well, his first film role was in Beverly Hills Cop 2, and that was 1987. Oop, I gotta get there soon. But I think he really didn't start doing movies and TV until the early 90s. And granted, this movie was 1998, so it was around when Chris Rock was really starting to get into movies and TV. And this still technically is one of his earlier roles. But I think he sticks out like a sore thumb in this movie. He's not funny in this movie, even remotely. There's a couple scenes where he's trying to be funny, but for me, it just falls flat on its face, and to me, Chris Rock just should not have been cast as this character. I would have gone for a different actor. I'm not saying that I'm not saying to disrespect Chris Rock. He's not a bad actor, like I said. He's a funny son of a bitch. Just in this movie, it just wasn't the right actor for the role. But the other two issues that I think are detrimental for the film, the first is that Riggs is really just. I feel like Mel Gibson was phoning it in for as Riggs in this movie, because he's just not as badass in this film. They kind of try to justify that by making Riggs just being aware that yeah, I'm getting old. I feel like age is starting to catch up to me. Uh, and also they try to ante up on the emotional side of Riggs, showing that he is hesitant to move on after Vicky, and he's hesitant to start a new family with Lorna and move on with her. Which all that is great, but I still, for the most part, really do feel that Mel Gibson was kind of phoning it in as Riggs in this movie, because he's just not as badass. He's not. You don't see the Mel Gibson rage moment whatsoever. Well, okay, you kind of see it, but that's just because he was caught up in the fight. We don't see a Mel Gibson rage moment except for the final fight in this movie whatsoever. A lot of the movie is spent him just moping and groaning around, saying, "Ugh, I'm getting too old for this shit." He's becoming Murtaugh. So that's, for me, that's disappointing. And the last issue that I have with this movie is that I feel like the villains in this movie are pretty damn bland. With the exception of Wasing Ku, but even he I feel like he's kind of bland. He has a sense of threat to him because he certainly is an intimidating character, but he doesn't have that much dialogue. He doesn't have that much screen time. He doesn't have that much threatening presence to him. Um, well, he does, but he also doesn't. I just feel like he's bland. And the Chinese triad in general in this movie, it really is bland. Um, and I almost kind of want to say that the villains in this movie are more bland than the ones in the first Lethal Weapon. But at least here, the villains have some type of sense of threat from them. In the first movie, I felt no sense of threat from them whatsoever. And again, I'm not saying that in any means of disrespect towards Jet Li. He's a great martial artist. He can be a great actor at times. I find that just in terms of acting, he's kind of hit and miss. He's fantastic in Unleashed, though. That is a fantastic film. And overall, that's all I really have to say about Lethal Weapon 4. I guess it's not as short as I thought it would be. Lethal Weapon 4, I mean, it is an entertaining film, and if you want to give it a shot, especially if you're a Lethal Weapon fan, I definitely do recommend you check it out. So I'm going to give this movie the same rating of Lethal Weapon 1, and that is an 8 out of 10. It's still an entertaining movie, though I feel like it's not the most satisfying conclusion to the film series. It just kind of feels like another chapter in the life of Riggs and Murtaugh. I've heard plans of there being a supposed fifth film, but I kind of feel like that's just kind of not going to happen. If it does, and they can get Danny Glover and Mel Gibson back one last time as Martin Riggs and give the series a definitive end, I would welcome that. But for now, especially as a finale for the series, it's a little disappointing in that aspect. But it is, as a Lethal Weapon fan, I can't help but recommend this movie. It is entertaining, and it is worth a watch. So check it out. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Share this video with your friends, and look forward to the next review where I can hopefully get my brother over here so we can re-review The Gallows. I'm not looking forward to that. So once again, post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and subscribe button. Share this video with your friends, and go outside and beat the shit out of Chinese triad members and impale them with a sharp piece of metal. And I will see you in the next one.